What's interesting, Laura, I mean, obviously prior to joining DSM, one of the things that you were known for in the market is, you an expert around employee listening and continuous listening. And that's why I think it's particularly interesting that you have ownership for both people analytics and employee experience. Do you think there are synergies between the two that you can leverage or already are leveraging?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel super fortunate to have both analytics and employee experience in my portfolio because the two disciplines heavily rely on one another to be successful. I think the most intuitively, we know that employee experience is personal, it's subjective. And so this is about connecting and understanding to what matters most to our people. And so by definition, that starts from listening, from research, from analytics, not from assumptions. So therefore, employee listening and analytics for me are really the lifeblood of employee experience efforts. So that's one. Probably less understood or intuitive is that employee experience is equally important to analytics, because in the end, employee experience is essentially about designing solutions and services with the human in mind. And so my strong belief is that this human-centered design is actually very critical to accelerate progress and adoption in the field of analytics. Because if we don't understand who the end user is, or if we don't start with the end user in mind and with a thorough understanding of what keeps these people awake at night, we will never be able to truly embed analytics into our ways of working and to get sustainable value out of it. So that is for me the second point. So employee experience is equally essential to analytics, just as much as analytics and employee listening are critical for employee experience.
You talked about obviously linking people analytics and employee experience together. We know one of the challenges for doing people analytics, particularly when we're based in Europe, is some of the challenges around data privacy, works councils, and everything else. How does focusing a lot of the people analytics work on understanding and improving the employee experience actually support some of those conversations with privacy teams and works councils?
Yeah, for me, David, employee listening is it's probably the most powerful, but probably also the easiest way to quickly collect scalable information about sentiment, about behaviors, about what matters most to our people, which is also a reason why I prioritize a lot of employee listening initiatives into my work. I think for too long, analytics has been focused on the data we have, whereas for me, a big part of the work is on data enrichment, and that enrichment in the space of employee experience clearly comes from the voice of our own employees. And so I think also from a GDPR, from a data privacy perspective, if we're very transparent as to how these results will be used to optimize the experiences of our people, it's actually quite easy. I need to be mindful, because obviously it requires a decent setup and some thorough thinking and the right interactions with works councils and the legal department. But nevertheless, for me, employee listening and listening to the voice of employees is a much easier way than working, for instance, with passive data and system data to get a sense of how people are acting or interacting with our systems.
And I think you hinted at one of the other key elements of employee listening there is we go out and we ask our employees questions, we collect the data, but then ultimately it needs to lead to actions, which I guess comes back to your insights to outcomes kind of mantra that you have for your team.
Yes, absolutely. So this is so I think in the space of employee listening, there are a couple of things that my team is working on. And one of them is clearly the closing the loop and the action. I think maybe for me, again, as mentioned, I think that today, especially in large global organizations, there are only a few things that can be so powerful and impactful than a thoroughly designed and a robust listening strategy. And when I talk about thoroughly designed, that first and foremost for me really means that all listening efforts should have a very clear connection to our strategic priorities. I think for too long, a lot of companies have been buying commercially exploited and very standard questionnaires, which didn't have any concrete connection to their company strategy, whether that's an overall strategy or an employee experience strategy. So it were basically the survey vendors telling us what to measure rather than determining the right questionnaires in light of our strategic priorities. And that's definitely one of those areas where my team and I am trying to bring change. And the second one for me is definitely also the actionability. And I strongly leverage my background in neuropsychology there, where today, a lot of the action is not about heavy lifting actions or lengthy rollout programs driven by HR, but also about activating the individual and using some of the nudging principles that have been introduced by the field of neuropsychology and behavioral science. So those are a couple of the elements that we prioritize to better close the loop.
And you see that those going down that kind of, empowering individuals is where you actually see the action happening, and then I guess you then can use your listening to check if it's happening, and B, what the impact is. Exactly.
And I think looking at the individual as an active agent in boosting engagement, well-being, and so forth is a super essential element. It's not just HR, it's not just leadership. Everyone to a certain extent can own employee engagement, employee experience, and therefore targeting that individual is one of the essential elements, I think, one of the steps that we need to take as a next step in the employee listening strategy.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.